And that can be really tricky and painful, honestly, if you're different, you're wired differently, and the other person isn't going to change, you're not going to change. And so we have to figure out some paradigm shifts where we can change that transaction between the two of you so that it works for both.
Before we get into today's conversation, I want to thank the PLAY, which stands for Please Learn As You Education Corporation, for supporting the Erie Wellness Podcast and invite you to their back to school silent disco that they have coming up this month. As the new school year approaches, many young people, especially those in the LGBTQIA+ community, may experience increased anxiety, pressure, or uncertainty about returning to school this year. This upbeat, fun event is a reminder that every young person deserves to feel seen, celebrated, and supported by their community. Come join the fun on Friday, August 21st from 6 to 10 p.m. at the Overlook at Collier's Hill. Enjoy live sets, silent disco headphones, glow gear, food trucks, and LGBTQIA+ owned businesses and community resources. Come start the school year with a strong sense of belonging. Get your tickets at theplayedcorp.com/upcoming-events or through the link in this episode's description. Now let's get on to today's conversation. Welcome back, friends, to the Erie Wellness Podcast, where we explore a wide range of wellness topics, highlight the incredible local professionals right here in our community, and encourage you to advocate for your own health and well-being. This week, we're stepping into an honest conversation about resentment in marriage, where it comes from, how it shows up, and what couples can do before it becomes a deeper divide in their relationship. Today, I'm joined by Angie Charter, a licensed clinical social worker serving individuals, couples, adolescents, and families in the Erie community. Angie has 21 years of experience in psychotherapy with specialized training in dialectical behavior therapy and PACT couples therapy. She especially loves supporting individuals and couples through faith-based work and helping local families build stronger and healthier relationships. Welcome, Angie.
Thank you.
I'd love for you to start off sharing a little bit about your story, talk about how you even got interested in therapy, and also, what was the biggest highlight of your career before kind of shifting into private practice?
Oh, that's a great question. I knew I wanted to be a therapist really early in life. So I would say like high school, I was able to take advantage of the guidance counselor in my school, like it just in a hard season, like so many adolescents go through. And I would just say that it impacted my life in such a meaningful way that I knew I wanted to do that. So lucky me, I got to go straight for what I was interested in right out the gate from high school. Went to college, graduate school after that, and have had multiple experiences in all kinds of arenas. Hard to find a favorite. I would say school mental health in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was on a reservation where 10 tribes were bussed in. And I was like the only white girl on campus. So everybody would turn their head when I got out of my car. And that was such a humbling and enlightening experience. So I would say that was probably my favorite. But I've done all kinds of things from domestic violence, sexual assault advocacy work to acute psychiatric inpatient care, residential care for adolescents, mental health, drug court, medical social work. Oh my gosh, all kinds of things. I guess I don't like to be bored. You could say that when you look at my resume.
Well, you've certainly done a lot of it and a lot of hard things too. Like you've witnessed a lot throughout the 21 years of your career. So your relationship, we'll kind of dive into like the main part of today's conversation, but it's like your relationship with your partner will hopefully be one of the longest and most meaningful relationships in your life. So how did you eventually get into PACT couples therapy, and how is it different from traditional marriage counseling?
Yes. I love this story. So as a dialectical behavior therapist, or DBT for short, because that's, you don't want to say that 10 times fast. But I was doing some training in La Jolla, California on mindfulness, and I ran into Stan Tekin, who's the creator of PACT psychotherapy. And he was speaking about his method. And one of the first things that he talked about is how human beings are really tribal. And what I had always heard for years and years and years is a person has to be independent in order to have a healthy relationship. And what he talked about just kind of blew my mind, because he was saying, really, what we need in relationships is interdependency, not codependency. So it just made sense, given that people are consistently pursuing relationships, right? You see people jumping out of a relationship or ending a relationship and wanting to start a new one pretty quickly. And it's because of the vulnerability a person feels when they're alone and isolated. So when we think back about caveman days, people had a hunter and a gatherer and this or that. And if you were missing something in your tribe, you were really vulnerable and didn't get your needs met. And so there's this force that everybody's been fighting, trying to do this other thing that just doesn't even make any sense. And so just everything he said made a lot of sense to me. And I just became really interested in what his work included, and pursued training in PACT.
And in marriages, oftentimes each individual person like tries to do things on their own too, like, and we're not really working together. We're saying,
absolutely.
Or, kind of, I'll just do this, or I'll make this decision on this or whatever, instead of really, making it seem like we are in this community-based like unit here inside of our house. So
absolutely, I think it's a huge mindset shift, from singleness and I to a we, and that makes a huge difference in marriage and couples.
So what do you hope that our listeners learn about PACT couples therapy from this conversation?
Oh goodness, well, I just feel like it's so wildly different than traditional couples therapy in so many venues. I don't know if, I'm sure lots of people have been to couples therapy at some point in their relationship. And this is just a unique experience. And I find it to be more effective than traditional psychotherapy, just in the sense, like, first of all, that the sessions are longer. They're an average of 2 to 3 hours per session, as opposed to 1 hour. You're sitting in rolling chairs facing each other the entire time, just kind of building some attachment. And so it just looks really different from those perspectives.
Can you share why the longer sessions are so important?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're just so much more effective, because a lot of people will tell you they've been to couples therapy and it didn't help at all. And I would say that in a lot of cases, that's true. And the reason for that is the simple fact that it was too short. So in an hour, you have 2 systems, 2 brains, 2 minds, 2 experiences that you really have to unpack and process. And so what happens in an hour session is you come in, you get into an argument, and then you go home. There's not enough time to really delve through what's actually happening and create a sense of cohesion or improvement or problem solving at all. So the 2-hour sessions, I think, are really vital to success in couples therapy.
I liked your second point too, of you need to be looking at each other, which when you were in the beginning of your relationships, that was no big deal. But it's so funny how when you're just kind of in the go of life, you're like, when I've actually looked at you, Sometimes, depending on where you're at in what season of life, life gets really busy. So taking that time to just look at each other again. And do you notice that couples kind of are this is kind of awkward. We haven't really done this very often recently.
Yeah, they come in and they're like, what are you making me do? This is so uncomfortable. And truly, there is a method to the madness, which is it puts us in a comforted, kind of semi meditative state when you're in eye contact with somebody for a prolonged amount of time. It actually is really comforting and connective. So at first it's really uncomfortable, but then as you kind of settle in, it actually allows us to get in under defense mechanisms and get some really meaningful work done.
Yeah. So when couples come to see you, what are some of the most common sources of resentment that you see?
Yeah, that's a great question. That could really run the gamut. It could be I have to pick up his socks every day to a person feels that one of the spouses puts the other one below them to we're not being intimate at all and haven't been for a really long time, or betrayal, little betrayal, big B betrayal, which means an affair.
Mhm.
um, so it really could be a lot of things.
And so after I learned a little bit more about resentment, it happened to come up in something that me and my husband, there was something that happened in the morning, and I actually used the word resentment.
Okay.
And it kind of felt like vulnerable to say that versus like maybe reacting in a different way, but to say like, I
Yeah.
kind of feel some resentment that like you didn't help with that.
Mhm.
So it does have this like vulnerable, sense. And, I'm sure there's lots of things that he could use towards me. And like, I'm feeling resentful in this way, but it is kind of a powerful word to use instead of
Wonderful.
bringing other things up in a different way.
Oh, absolutely. I think that word packs a big punch, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It might be
Yeah.
more of an attention getter than, you didn't do
Yeah.
this or that.
Right. When you talk about these little microaggressions in relationships, so what are they and why are they so damaging over time? And obviously, it's different couple to couple, right? Some of these micro relationships can show up after a year. Sometimes it takes 5 to 10 years and then things just blow up. But what's the important thing that we need to know about these microaggressions?
Right. Well, I think microaggressions are, just by nature of the term, meaning like small aggressions, like, not picking up the socks or not helping with things with the kids or, gosh, the toothpaste or the kitchen
Mhm.
sink is always dirty and you never rinse it out. It could be anything, but the problem with it is not really about the aggression itself or the thing that's the identified problem. It's really
Mhm.
the lack of problem solving underneath it. So we're going through these experiences, and maybe the end result of those small things piling up is that one partner feels alone in the marriage, and which really in the end isn't very micro. That's not small at all. It becomes a really big issue, and then that
Mhm.
partner will start to distance, and then the relationship looks really different as a result of that. And so that happens when there's no problem solving as we go along. It's really important to solve problems as they come up, even if it feels like a lot of work, rather
Mhm.
than letting them build up over time. And then it's like using the toilet and never flushing. It's just going to get bad really quick.
Mhm. Do you find that with some of your clients, like some people are good at problem solving and some
Mhm.
people aren't? Or like is majority of people just not good at this? Like, why aren't we taught some of this stuff early on?
Yeah, I think that really depends. And I think probably the biggest difference that I see in that is that people who have parents who demonstrate and role model good and effective problem solving. So a
Mhm.
lot of people think they are not supposed to argue in front of their children, and I would disagree with that statement. I don't want you to argue about big things in front of them, nothing that's going to get explosive or intense, but little microaggressions, for example, and showing them, communication and apologies, listening, understanding, and communication back and forth is really valuable to children to see. So
Mhm.
what we see our parents doing is has a huge impact in how we behave in our own marriage.
Mhm. Right. And so often it was taught, you just don't fight in front of each other or you don't talk, and then
Right.
that leads to even more disruption later on.
Right.
So
Yep. Absolutely.
So, one of the principles of PACT is learning to read your partner. So, when you see the couples inside your therapy room, what do you notice about when you're reading the partners and then when you're teaching them how to read each other?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons we use the rolling chairs is we can evaluate when somebody needs distance or closeness, when somebody is, just feeling uncomfortable when they look away from their partner, when do they look toward them, perhaps for a bid for attention or affection. You can see all kinds of things, like rapid
Mhm.
Rapid breathing is something that I see a lot of times, and a cue that a lot of partners miss that is a huge signal of distress. So unless you know to be looking for that, you're probably going to miss it.
Mhm.
If you're aware of some of those micro expressions as well, like looking away, tapping your foot, rapid breathing, tightness in the chest, tightening your hands or fists, any of those kinds of things can be indicative of a higher arousal. And I don't mean like the fun kind of arousal. I'm talking about emotional upheaval, where we're feeling a little more distress. And so that's really important to be able to see in one another and to be responsive to it. So if
Mhm.
I see that my partner is getting, a higher arousal, then I know that I need to step in. That's my business to get that arousal down so that there's calmness. Because what starts to happen is one person gets dysregulated and their brain's just kind of like their alarm system is going off in their brain. And then the other partner's alarm system starts going off in their brain in response to it. And then you both are kind of at war with one another.
Mhm.
And so one of the things that PACT teaches is about primitives and ambassadors. So your brain has two separate functions. One of them is protective, which is the primitive brain, and it's cheaper software, it's automatic, it's protective, and it's defensive. Right. And that's the one that gets us into trouble. But we also have the other side of our brain, which is the ambassador side. And that one is more regulated. It allows problem solving. It can listen. It is slower. It is more expensive to use. In other words, it takes more resources to
Mhm.
apply. But when we're in the primitive brain, we really can't problem solve. We can't remember. You have a lot of functions in your brain that just kind of turn off when you're in that state. And so it's really important to recognize those signals so that you can intervene quickly and get your partner regulated. And then we're not up here at war together.
Mhm. What are the ways you get your partner regulated, though?
That varies per person. So people are really different in that sense. And a lot of that is related to attachment systems. So we're going to kind of get in the weeds here on this, but attachment systems are pretty much automatic in your brain too. So they're developed by the time you're age 2,
Mhm.
between birth and age 2, and they don't typically change over time. So you can be one of three things. You can be an island, a wave, or an anchor, and that's a simple way to put it. But an island really regulates by themselves. They feel calm alone. They relax alone. They don't need their partner really to regulate and feel better.
Mhm.
And a person who is a wave really needs another person to help them regulate. They're going to move toward their partner and request problem solving, like right now.
Mhm.
And so sometimes you'll get like an island and a wave together, and the wave is pursuing the island, and the island's pulling away. And then over time, what will happen is this wave becomes an island too, and now you have no relationship. Right. So how people pursue and distance and when and how, all of that matters. And so we start to also unpack what we look like, right? And even though we're different, um, we can teach ourselves to like respond in a very effective way for our partner.
Mhm. Even bringing up you don't go to bed angry or some of those other things,
Mhm.
knowing what that style is for your partner is so important because then you need to know, do we need to deal with this right now or does the other person really need like time to
Right.
re-regulate somewhere else and how do you kind of complement each other during that type of situation?
Right. And that can be really tricky and painful, honestly, if you're different, you're wired differently, and
Mhm.
the other person isn't going to change, you're not going to change. And so we have to figure out some paradigm shifts where we can change that transaction between the two of you so that it works for both.
Mhm.
So one of the ones that I use a lot is the catch and release method. So you have one person that is the wave needing information immediately, and the island who needs to withdraw. So what we do is teach the island to move into the wave and say, "I need, a little bit of time, but I will be back with you. I know this is painful," or something like that. And
Mhm.
then the wave allows the island to distance, and then we come back to problem solving. when our brains are a little bit more online and all those functions are actually effective.
Mhm. One thing that I appreciate about your approach is that you really do encourage people to understand themselves and not really live from a victim mindset.
Mhm.
Um, so, what does that look like in marriage? And how can people, they can stand up for themselves and share what they're feeling and, be their own person too. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, I just think, and especially where resentment is concerned, it's really easy to get yourself into this perspective where you have been the victim and your partner's the perpetrator. And as long as we stay in that mindset, that's going to get in the way of doing actual work and pursuing partnership and relationship
mhm,
connection and all of those things. And so it's really ineffective in relationships when that dynamic starts to occur.
mhm,
So I think it's just important for people to recognize, resentment really isn't actually resentment. Resentment can feel really angry. It can feel hot, or it can feel like cold anger too, distant, things like that. It can look really, really different. But what it actually is grief. It's not
mhm,
resentment at all. That's what I would say to people is like, really, that might be what you're feeling, but underneath it is something else. And as long as you're stuck in that victim mentality, you're not going to
mhm,
be able to access the grief and really process the real feelings. And hopefully, if we can get people to identify the correct emotion, then that sends us down the correct path of healing.
mhm,
So we can help the partner come alongside the person feeling resentment, and they can move through that together. So when you think about, like, if you've lost somebody and you go to the funeral, your whole family is probably there, right? Ideally, that we're all grieving together. And there's something really healing about doing that together versus doing it by yourself. So that's why funerals are so important, right? Because we're gathering together and honoring the person and really doing that cohesively with our tribe. That's really the goal for managing resentment in marriage, is that the angry person has to be a little bit more vulnerable. So, like you mentioned, that resentment does feel a little bit more vulnerable, right?
mhm.
That's probably because you're like labeling that in a more effective way. And it's easy to manage that when you're vulnerable versus trying to hug a porcupine. That doesn't work
Mhm,
very well. Nobody wants to do that.
mhm,
But the porcupine might really need a hug, you know?
right. What do you say though to couples who, I mean, someone did do something that was not okay,
Yeah.
um, and they've crossed a line, and like in some capacity, like the other significant other is the victim, even with an affair or something like that. So
Totally.
how
Mhm.
do you make sure that you're communicating? But I understand how that would be grief too. Underneath it, it's grief.
Right. Exactly. So I think it's not that somebody wasn't a victim. I think, there are plenty of situations where that's absolutely the case. And we're
Mhm,
not victim shaming by any means. It's just that mind, it's really more about the mindset and what does that do? How does that keep me stuck versus how does that help me move forward to heal?
mhm,
And that a lot of times is kind of the turning point of whether or not somebody's going to get better, right? Or
mhm,
stay bitter. And those are
mhm,
kind of the options.
mhm.
Yeah,
Which are hard options, right? I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because we might feel completely justified in our bitterness.
mhm,
And there probably is ample justification in some cases, in a situation like an affair or abusive behavior. There's all kinds of situations
mhm,
where we can really feel justified in that. It's just unfortunately not helpful for us, and it doesn't do anything to help us move forward through it.
right, right.
We're going to take a quick break from today's episode to hear a word from one of our sponsors. Additional support for today's episode comes from Bridge Refill Market, Erie's local refill shop, helping families reduce waste one refill at a time. As of May 2026, the community has helped save over 28,440 containers from the landfill through refills at the shop. From laundry detergent and dish soap to organic bulk foods and personal care products, you can bring your own containers and refill only what you need. Learn more at bridgerefill.com. Now let's get back to today's conversation.
So I do know that you love working with couples that are faith-based and prioritize that in their lives. So how does that play into the picture?
Yeah, I mean, I love working with couples in this avenue because it is just so interesting how quickly people respond when they do have a faith and they share it together. I think working through resentment specifically is a lot easier when you have a third entity that you can kind of rely on to help you navigate those feelings. It's just a whole different experience. So I love opportunities to be able to pray with couples. That's such powerful work and I feel so blessed and privileged to be able to do that with people. And I do see like they're probably in therapy half the time compared to people who don't share a faith. It's very interesting how much more effective that can be when we don't have ourselves to rely on. It's a whole different experience if we have God to rely on.
Right. And something bigger than ourselves, right? Like it's bigger than me and my partner. And if too, depending on what religion you are, understanding that this unity is such a power, like we made this commitment, not just to ourselves, but to a higher power too. So that puts a little bit more of an importance on it as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the commitment piece is really different in a case where it is more of a covenant than necessarily like a worldly contract or a commitment that we can always get out of. There's ways out of contracts, but a covenant should be managed differently in theory.
I do too want to point out our conversation a little bit earlier and really being good stewards and good examples for our children.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
absolutely.
We don't want this to keep repeating itself, generation to generation.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you have to say about that?
Yeah. I just think it's so important that couples choose each other, even over their kids, right? And I think a lot of that is shown. There's like a pecking order that we establish in our homes, right? Who gets greeted first when you walk in the door? Who gets their dinner first? Who comes to whom? How does all of that look? And so I think it's really important to prioritize partnership first. So my husband and I, when we first met, like when we were dating, we put this into place, which is, the person who's at home first is going to drop everything and come to the door to greet the person entering. And that's a huge thing. It just says to everybody, this is really important. And kids are watching that. They're learning how to treat their partner. And hopefully that's going to carry forward through generations and improve partnerships. And there's nothing more important than marriage when you think about it. It's absolutely at the core of the family. In a good and healthy family dynamic, the partnership is the hub. It's the very center, and the children and the dogs and the finances and the in-laws and the jobs and all those things are spokes. They're thirds that the partnership in the middle has to manage. And so it's really important for this hub to be very healthy, for it to be, I call it the couple bubble, it's protective. You're in it together, right? You're not you're fighting all of these battles on the outside as a unit, not having these things in between you and one person's managing it. A lot of it is mindset shift and understanding, like, if you look at the world from that perspective, it's going to change a lot of the things that you do. And your kids are watching and you're showing them what marriage is going to be like. And they're going to pick partnership that is similar to what you're showing them. And so a lot of times that's like, ooh, that's an attention getter. Like I will definitely question myself going, okay, would I want my son to marry somebody who acts like me? Right. So that's a good motivator to kind of like change the perspective and change behavior.
Right. Well, and I think that example is so sweet because you have to admit that, like, when you see older couples that are like, give each other a kiss or holding hands, you're just like, oh, they're prioritizing their relationships. That's really sweet.
I know, that is really sweet to see.
It reminds me too of the song by Maren Morris, when the bones are good, the rest don't matter. So it's true. It's like when you have a really good, strong foundation, like you can really handle all of these other things externally that's going on. Or they just don't matter, right? Where
Right.
your priorities lie. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yep. So I think marriage partnership is absolutely the bones of the home. Mhm.
and what does like a typical, I know obviously your session lengths are a little bit longer, but is it weekly? Is it every other week that you would prefer to meet with couples?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if something's really, really on fire, I might see you once a week for a little bit, but typically it's biweekly.
Mhm.
We are investing a lot of time and certainly finances and all of those things, resources, all around for those longer sessions, hopefully for that bigger punch. And so it allows you time after leaving to practice what we talk about for a couple weeks. I always give homework. It's not written homework because no one does that, but like real life experience, practicing different transactional models and things like that. So
Mhm.
typically it's biweekly to start.
Quick question that I just thought of. So is it generally just the couples going together, or sometimes are you meeting with each person individually as well? And maybe those are shorter sessions too, but it probably just depends on the situation. But is there situations where you would encourage that?
Meeting individually.
Yeah.
Very rarely, but yes.
Okay. Okay.
And when that happens, I always make sure that there's an even playing field, right? So it's really important for the therapist to be very neutral in couples work. So if I see one partner individually, I see the other one individually for the same amount of time.
Mhm.
But I tried really to avoid that. I think people often ask me, do we need individual therapy and couples therapy? Or, do we need to do a little bit of that before we enter couples therapy? And what I think
Mhm.
is that if you're having individual issues that are presenting themselves in the partnership, that's happening for a reason. And so there's a lot of individual work that can actually be done in couples therapy. In fact, it's a really great venue for that to happen, um,
Mhm.
because we often pursue relationships that do emulate our childhood relationships in an attempt to kind of make those corrections. And so I think doing that together is actually a lot of times more effective than you would think. I also think that doing individual work when you're having couple issues is sometimes iatrogenic, where it does more harm than good. In that, you have two different people with half the story, with two different guides kind of leading them whichever way, right? And a lot of times it can pull people apart. So I think you have to be really cautious. So if you decide to do individual therapy and couples therapy separately, make sure that your individual therapist knows how to do couples therapy, because they're looking at it from that perspective of, okay, what might this other partner be seeing on this other side,
Mhm.
where, somebody who isn't trained in that is not going to be looking at it in the same way. So it
Okay.
can really actually do more damage.
Mhm. Before we wrap up, what's one small change every couple could make this week that would help strengthen their marriage?
Oh, yes, I love this question. So, one of the most effective things you can do is fight touching and looking in each other's eyes. So I know that this can feel really uncomfortable when you're angry. And so if you don't want to like hold hands and like gaze into each other's eyes and remember how in love you are when you're really pissed off, I think that an ET touch can work. Is what I call this. So you just touch each
You're like,
other. Yeah, or forehead to forehead, honestly, is a great way to do it. Like you wouldn't do the whole conversation that way, but like it makes you laugh a little bit and
mhm.
it's a connection. And what that does is it says to the brain, I'm here, right? I am here with you and I'm listening and I'm paying attention. And so that settles all of that arousal that happens when we start to get elevated, without even using any words, right? So people can mess up all over the place with words. We say all kinds of dumb things. And
Mhm.
so what that does is kind of supersede any any question about whether or not you're secure in your relationship. right? So that security piece is huge. We're always looking to reestablish security in the functioning of the relationship. So any trouble that's happening within it is really a source of insecurity, if you want to kind of boil it down. And so that physical touch is really helpful when we're trying to navigate conflict.
Okay. So
Yep.
holding hands, an ET touch, or you could do like forehead to forehead. And
Yep.
see what one you like better.
Yeah. Ideally, you just kind of grab each other and go, just even take a second and look at each other's eyes for a minute. Like everything should kind of drop. Like it's very interesting how our arousal system, it can be a friend or a foe, right? Like it's wired for protection. And so we can do different things to use our bodies to our advantage because of how we're wired that way. So very interesting.
Well, I even invite every couple to your example of like when the other person maybe is walking in the door from doing something or coming home from work, like kind of dropping everything and making it a priority to like say hello and give a kiss and a hug and just be like, you are a priority and I'm glad that you're here kind of thing.
Yeah,
Instead of
absolutely.
just coming in and,
right.
You got to do this and this needs to get done before dinner, whatever it is.
Right. My husband came home the other day and I was like, where in the heck? What took you so long? And he's like, that was not a great beginning to the evening. So as you can imagine,
Right.
And we've made it a practice to always do the drop everything and greet each other at the door. And so we had to redo that. And sometimes you're going to miss it. And that's okay. You just say, oops, I forgot. Let's go back and start this over. You can totally do that.
Yeah. Nope. It doesn't have to be perfect. Relationships are definitely not perfect.
Oh, it is. Anything but that,
learning thing.
Yeah.
So if someone realizes that maybe resentment is creeping in and they want help to be able to take advantage of how do we improve this before it keeps getting worse, where do they begin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help you. You can reach me on my website, which is www.angiecharterlcsw.com. There's a book now button right there on the website, or you can reach me by phone.
Well, Angie, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your insight with us today. I hope that this conversation encourages couples and their partners to recognize resentment early, communicate more openly, and make space for healing and connection in their relationships. So thanks for being a guest here on the Erie Wellness Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I appreciate it.
All right, friends, before we wrap up, here's the part I need to share. This podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only. I'm just your friend behind the mic. Nothing shared on this podcast creates a patient relationship with any of our guests or replaces the guidance of your physician, professional coach, or other qualified expert. And the views shared by guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily reflect the beliefs or values of the Erie Wellness Podcast. My goal is to simply create a space for real, open conversations that help us all learn, grow, and feel a little more connected on our wellness journeys. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you back here next time.